Hey, team, look, welcome. It's Jeff Robertson with the Second Chance podcast, and I have a guest for you today. If you're not following Seth Gehle on social media, he's going to give you his handle and make sure you give him a follow because he is absolutely got an amazing story. I've been reading up on this guy, and I cannot wait to get into the nuts and bolts of this. But the one thing I want to tell you, we're going to lead into some success. He's got a heck of a story, but man, tell me, I've been looking at this awards in professional construction. Tell me what a day in a professional construction person's look like, and how do you get to these awards, man?
Well, I got into construction after I got out of the army. I served 8 years, and then I got right into construction. Fortunately enough, I landed a project manager, superintendent type role at a home building company. So I was doing that for a few years. Did that. I built homes for about 3 years, and building homes, it's just effort. It's as much effort as you want to put into it, you'll get the return and the reward out of it. So I got in there without a degree, no education, no experience in construction, and within 3 to 6 months, I was the number one guy in the division. By the end of the year, I was number three in the nation out of over 1,000 construction managers. And then the following year, so my second year in construction, I held the number one spot for about 6 to 8 months in the entire country. And then just to clarify there too, for that basically the entire time I was at this company for about 18 months, 2 years, I I held the number one spot in the division and just crushed it. And that's all. That was all just effort. So
That's awesome, and I like the way you capped that. Just effort, and I think we all people, but everybody takes for granted what a little bit of effort to get you. But did your military career and background did it set you up for success in this?
it does because like police and other Leo like firefighters, police, and then construction, specifically home building, you're always working by yourself, or a lot of times you're working by yourself, and then it requires some sort of self like discipline and drive to do things because when you're building homes, you're out there in a neighborhood by yourself. And so I could sit in my truck all day and just sleep and nobody would know, so it's how much you can do every single day and regulate that. And in the military, it's just like that. You wake up, you go to work, everything is done through you. Nobody's really holding your hand and forcing you to do the right thing.
Tell me real quick. Tell me what your I think you guys call it MOS, or what was your duties? What was your assignment in the military?
Yeah, MOS. I was at 11. I was 11 Charlie for a few years, and then I switched over to 11 Bravo, which 11 Charlie is a mortarman. They're all under the infantry, but 11 Charlie is a mortarman, and then I switched over to being like a rifleman, infantryman after a few years of that. So I did 5 years and some change active duty, and yeah, all that time was spent infantry.
Did you spend any time in leadership, or just straight as a infantry person?
Well, I was eventually I became a team leader. So I was a team leader for the last maybe 2 years I was in. The last
Yeah.
2 years I was an E5 sergeant team leader.
That's awesome. And that kind of leads into like what we were talking about as before we got going on just your experiences and how that just same it was the same similar to law enforcement where a lot of people plugged in with me and I just got extra like trainings and on different things and how we can apply that to the private sector from going from public service, military, fire, police, the things that I like to talk about. And then I struggle with that, Seth, was my self worth in 2007 was I could have put it inside of a pen, a thread hole for on a pen, and because I just no one was around me to help me bring out those strong suits. So it's really good that you found that, man. But it sounds like, and one I want to get started. I got three questions for you. Um, and to lead into your military career and how you come into success in the construction business, but you've had a life filled with incredible challenges and many second chances. Could you share a specific turning point that significantly changed your life direction and how you managed to seize that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean there's two really good ones I would say. One is right before my daughter was born. I had just gotten promoted, so I was an E5 sergeant team leader at the 82nd Airborne Division, and my daughter was about 3 months away from being born, and my wife and I were $60,000 plus in debt. We had no savings account. I didn't even know what a savings account was. I had probably $20 in there just to keep the account open. And I was kind of going through a hard time in my military career. Just, there's a lot of stressors going on with getting ready for a deployment, being incredibly in debt, and my daughter's about to be there. So, and then we were a single income household too. So my wife quit working when my daughter was born. So around that time, I kind of started reading some books on personal development, leadership, finances. Started educating myself on some of those things because I knew that I would need to turn this around if we were going to live, because we were living paycheck to paycheck in the military, which, although you don't get paid a lot, you really shouldn't be doing that. Like, you're getting compensated enough to not have to live paycheck to paycheck. And I had to realize it was all behavioral. It wasn't a money problem; it's a behavior problem. So that was like my first time actually sitting down and being like, okay, this is my fault. I need to fix this. I need to change my own actions, behaviors, things like that. And
How old are you right now during this time period, Seth? Age wise?
I was probably had been, so my daughter is about to be 6, so that was about 6 years ago. So 23, 24 years old.
Man, that's awesome. You found it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I just, my whole life I had had this victim mentality, and so everything that happened to me, I blamed it on everything else around me, and nobody understood me, and nobody knew where I came from, and so all these problems that I had, I put them out, I projected them out on everybody else, and at that point, I really fixed my problems with everything except for my marriage. My marriage was the only thing that I really didn't focus on trying to fix, and excuse me. So, probably about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I started telling my story. And part of that now is I've addressed everything in my life except for my marriage. And now I'm finally kind of almost remarrying my wife.
Yeah.
So, our first 7 years of marriage was kind of rocky and bumpy, probably. And it was my fault. And now it's time for me to fix that and, do better. So this is like my 15th chance, but I would say probably my second, turning point. I had one with my daughter being born, and then one recently with sharing my story and finally getting over my trauma and tragedy. So
Yeah, I'm with you, and I probably I want to ask you, but you probably reading and learning about you, Seth. You had to figure out what love and relationship looked like on your own. There's this doesn't sound like you had a lot of mentoring on what that looks like as a child, right?
that's right. Yeah, I that's been the biggest problem with me. As a father, that was very natural to me. I was able to love my children unconditionally, and just, everything was all about them. And even in other podcasts or interviews or anything that I've done, I've always talked about my children as like, I've got these two beautiful children, I love them to death. And then I talk about, I'll say I have a wife and I have nothing to say about her, because it's so hard to express those emotions about somebody when you've gone through the things that I've gone through. And unfortunately, without a father and a bad mother in my life, and then other things happening, that love feels wrong. It doesn't feel right to be loved. It doesn't feel right to be happy about something. So that's something that I've had to learn, but then also just seek guidance and mentorship.
Seth, what does your wife do now? What is her role? Is she, or like for work and
Yeah.
whatnot?
Yeah, she works, she trains part-time at a gym. So there's like a burn boot camp is where she works, and she's a trainer there, and I don't know, she works there several days a week, and that's what she does right now.
She's got a passion for people, passion for helping people. I've worked in group exercise. I owned a Fit Body Boot Camp, which is Ernest's competitor.
Yep.
And so when you work inside a group exercise, you have a passion for helping people. How did you guys meet?
We met down in Savannah. She was going to college. I was down there. I was stationed in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and we met down there. So her birthday came around. I followed her on social media. I asked her to be her DD, and she said no. And so the next weekend we ended up hanging out, and then we hit it off from there. We got married 6 months into dating, and we've been married now for over 7 years.
That's awesome, dude. That's a really cool. I always enjoy hearing how just how people connected and in those. I think it just tells a lot part of our journey, and sometimes it's odd how you met and where you are now.
Yeah.
And then like I'm with you. I totally and listen, man. I grew up around family and just a lot of train wreck and different things. Mom was always in the picture as my mom, but like she wasn't around a lot. I was raised with aunts and uncles and grandma and grandpa, you know, because my mom was 17, almost 18 when she had me.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of growing up together. But now when I tell people, like I went through these phases and just uncertainty with my now wife of, just any day now she's going to leave, and any day now the situation's going to change, and even as some days I'll wake up and I'm like, all right, this is a day when all my momentum turns to crap, and she'll look at me sometimes, Seth, and say, where does this come from? I don't understand why. I'm like, listen, it's just, and I learned to talk about it, and I learned to just say, when I wake up in that mindset, sometimes I'll tell her and I'll go, hey, just so you know, this is what's on my mind today, and I know it's not going to happen, but I'm going to talk to you about
Yeah.
it.
Well, I
And
think
she,
I was gonna say, I
what,
just think if you're waking up and you're acknowledging it and you're talking about it,
yeah,
you're doing more than what most people do.
yeah, because I would call. I think I went through a phase where I would call other friends who experienced similar things, and all we would do is enable each other. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
man, I woke up thinking the same thing. Yeah, just it's on my mind, and um, coming out of police work, we did a lot of surveillance, and you was always, and we had heard stories of, girlfriends or wives showing up on the opposite side of what we was doing, and so that always stuck in our head as well about you're waiting, like, oh gosh, I'm just waiting for something negative to happen with that. But it's hard to. I'm glad you shared that with me because. And I agree with you on. And I tell my wife all the time, I would not have done a quarter of the things I do if I hadn't met you to get me moving out of a comfort zone that I was in. Man, that's awesome. And then, all right, so first kid 6 years old, or you have one before your daughter, right? Your daughter was first, 6 years old, and then you got your son. It's 4 years old.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Are you taking steps to improve that relationship with her? It sounds like you are, but like, what steps are you taking?
With my wife
Yeah.
specifically,
Yep.
the biggest thing I've had to do is express like love towards her, which sounds kind of backwards, like that should be a no-brainer.
Yep.
But if you've grown up like I have, then you would understand that it's very hard to be vulnerable and to love, and you have so much to lose. I have so much to lose with my wife. If my wife leaves, I lose my kids, and I lose the title of a husband, of a father. I lose a lot of things, my house. And so you have so much to lose with that person that it makes it scary and hard to be vulnerable with them. And so my whole time being married, I've never opened up to her in a way that I needed to. When we first got married, we had the puppy dog phase for, a year or two, and that
Yeah.
was great. But then it all went away. And I would tell her when we first got married that this is how marriage is supposed to be. The puppy dog phase is gone, and we don't have to love each other every single day. Like that's what I would say to her, and it's just not right. So what I do now is, and it hurts me to text my wife when I'm at work and say, "Hey, I love you, and I hope you're having a great day, and I just appreciate the hell out of you." Right? And so because I feel that pain, I have to go and look at my phone and address her and say those things. I have to come home from the gym and give her a hug and give her a kiss and tell her I love her. And I have to do those things that a woman needs in her life, which is that affection from a man. I have to do those things. Those things are hard, and that's the things that I'm uncomfortable with are the things that I need to do the most, and that's what helps you really elevate it. And as I've done that now in the last couple of months, the last 2 or 3 months, just processing and talking and going through all this, our relationship is kind of taking a 180. I would say,
Yeah.
it's not perfect. I mean, we just got into a big argument a couple of days ago, and we're yelling and screaming at each other, but after a few hours of going back and forth and discussing and going over our feelings and being very direct about things, we move on and we get past it. And, you kind of said that some days you'll wake up and this is like one of those days, right? Well, when you have that moment, you have to reach out and talk. You've got to look over at your wife and be like, hey, I'm just going to talk about this right now. I feel bad today, but I'm not going to let this ruin my day, and everybody has a thermometer and you can set it however you want. If you wake up and it's freaking hot, You can cool it off if you want. It's just a mindset thing. You have to tell yourself it is going to be a good day. And so many times I think what people do, and this is maybe what me and my wife did, this is certainly what I was doing. I don't know what was going on in her head, but if I was pissed off, I wasn't going to let her be a bigger asshole than me. Like if she was like kind of being quiet, I'm like, okay, I can be quiet too. If she's getting mad about something, okay, I get mad about something too. Like you're not going to outdo me right now. Instead of you're fighting fire with fire, right? Instead of walking in there and diffusing the situation, you're just fighting fire with fire, and it's that quiet, passive aggressive thing that happens for 2, 3, 4 days. I mean, we'd go 3, 4 days without talking, and it was just me. It was me. She'd come in and say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." Wouldn't want to talk to her, and I would tell her, "I don't need to talk to you." So I was doing a lot of wrong things, and I'm not proud of it at all. But part of that healing journey is addressing it now and fixing it. So and telling my story, because it's
Yeah.
vulnerability. I'm letting people know, like, dude, our marriage isn't perfect. We smile in pictures, and there's a lot of bad things that happen behind closed doors. We get into arguments, but this is how we fix it, and this is why I tell my story.
Yeah, I'm double your age probably to date myself, but I didn't come into this stuff. That's why I'm really proud of you at your age when you started really nailing this down, because I was knocking into my 30s when I really started having these moments of light bulb. But I stayed, like, I was so consumed with career and different things, and as that ended, then I had to deal with it. But I think you touched on everything, man. With you just got to date. Like we try to go out by ourselves once a week and just go do something, just us, go have dinner, shoot the breeze, and do all those things. And I can say I argued a lot because I didn't know how to freaking process emotions when I was younger, and my wife basically refused to argue with me. Like she would just be like, "Eh," and I'd be over here arguing by myself, and she'd be like, "Meh," and finally, she didn't engage me back, and we don't argue. Like we have your moments of where some days we just don't feel like speaking to each other, and we work through that. But like we don't raise our voices at each other. It just is not worth it. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But I tell you, the cool thing, the second thing I was going to ask you or get to, and I want you to break it down for me, but you got a book coming out. And the cool thing in your book, you detail 6 principles for leading a rewarding life post trauma. Can you explain which of these principles was the hardest for you to master and how it's impacted your life?
Yeah. So the 6 principles, it's all part of the company I just recently founded, which is the Impact Project. And the impact part of it is the 6 principles, right? So there's inspiration, mentality, perseverance, achievement, commitment, and tenacity. Those are the 6 principles that I talk about. I call them principles because I think they can be applied anywhere. And the one that I struggled with, and I think most people, is mentality. There's so many things you could talk about with mentality. There's so many analogies or metaphors, whatever, that you can use to try to reach somebody and get them to understand what you're talking about. You have like the two wolves. Which wolf are you going to feed? You're going to feed the victim or the warrior kind of mentality. The good one, the bad one. So the mentality was the biggest thing because that takes commitment, and it takes a relentless effort every day to fix your mentality. It's not like I wake up one day and I'm over it. My marriage doesn't get better in a day. I can't, or my life doesn't get better in a day. My book isn't going to write itself in a day. You have to, the mentality is worked on every single day intentionally to, to do the right things, to be a good person, to have this tenacity to survive and to overcome and thrive and lead others, inspire others. So the mentality part is my biggest struggle.
I think that leans in. My kids are a little bit older than yours. I didn't have kids till later. I'd had a bunch of screwed up kids back in my day if I'd have. But now, and that's as good as I watch them be athletically, is the mental game, and we spend a lot of time working on processing emotions. And Jill Bunny, that was at Jason Redmond's event, she spoke to the excitement and a lot of our emotions and a lot of our feelings when you're anxious and things. She goes, it's just excitement, and that was a really the way she presented that to me, man. It stuck with me, and she spoke to me when she said it because it is. And I brought it back and talked to my kids about it. I'm like, how you feeling right now? how are you feeling mentally, or and I'm like, it's just excitement, guys. Let's go have fun. So we try to turn that a lot of that mentality around into just having fun, which is
Mm-hmm.
harder for someone that's been through the stuff that you have. But tell me this: what is the name of the book?
The name of the book is Strength Beyond the Shadows.
Strength Behind the Shadows, and when is it due out?
Um, it is. We're don't have a date yet. Looking at like September, October, maybe. Definitely by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah,
But hopefully September, October timeframe.
yeah, you have to keep us all posted on that because I can't wait to I can't wait to dive in and just really learn more about your just the background behind everything that's got you passionate about it. You can see it, like I can see it. You know it, like when you connected with me, I put some content out through a couple of guys that we just know in common, and you reached out. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. As soon as you reached out, I'm like, yeah, I know that guy. Me and him's drinks from the same wells of hell. Sometimes putting ourselves through unnecessary stuff. Just as soon as we connected, so I was really excited to get to talk with you and learn more about you. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is your journey includes overcoming horrific childhood experiences and achieving success as a national award winning construction professional and motivational speaker. What advice would you give to someone who feels trapped by their past and is struggling to find their own second chance?
The biggest thing is you've got to address the problem. Okay, when something goes on and you have a traumatic past or traumatic situation, you have a traumatic event, you've got to process it and address it. And there's a time and a place for that. If you're a police officer and your buddy gets killed right there in front of you, that is not the time. That is not the place. You certainly need to finish the mission. I think Jason's a good example. He gets his face shot off. Like that is not the time to process what's happening. It's like let's finish the mission, get the hell out of here, and then we can start sorting it out afterwards. And going through the the process of dealing with all that trauma. So that looks like what that looks like is talking. You've got to talk and share. For 13 years, I hid all of the worst things that have ever happened to me. I hid that for 13 years because it was very shameful, and I didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to be judged, didn't want to deal with any of that. And for 13 years, it built up and built up in me. And I've dealt with the suicidal ideations for most of my life. I've dealt with almost losing my marriage multiple times now. I've dealt with a lot of pain and suffering just on my own because I wouldn't address these issues, these feelings, these emotions. And so, a few months ago, like I said, I started telling my story. And as soon as I did, the first time it was very hard and it was very poor storytelling. But as I've told it more and more, I start to realize like why I act a certain way, why it's hard to love, why my marriage was kind of jacked up, why it's sometimes looking at my kids hurts my feelings a little bit, why it's hard to love my kids, why it's hard to love other people, you know. But there's 8 billion people in the world. Statistically speaking, nearly half of those people have experienced my pain in some form or fashion. And at this point, I realize it's not about me anymore. It's about how many people can I connect and reach to and change their lives, change their mentality, and make an impact on them, whether it's individual people, communities, organizations, whatever it is. If I can reach more people and make an impact, which I have done, the little bit of speaking engagements that I've done, every time I do it, and not to say this in a bragging way, but when I get done speaking, people are approaching me versus everybody else because my story, like I said, statistically speaking, relates to more people than anybody else can in the room. I fit into a lot of categories, and to stand on the stage and be the man that I am, that was one of the harder things, especially with what happened to me, being a man, being a combat veteran, being this big gym rat, like bearded guy. I do jujitsu. I run ultra marathons. I've won these national awards. All of those things are great, but then when you hear about where you come from, that's what's inspiring. And so for the people that are trapped and they can't find their voice, I would say start talking, talk to somebody, find a trusted friend that you can talk to and process it. Journaling is an incredible outlet, and it's tedious, but nothing is going to come easy, right? You're not going to just get over this stuff easily. if something traumatic happened to you, you don't just talk about it one day and it's gone the next. It's with you for the rest of your life. There's a good friend of mine. His name's Trevor Beeman. He's a former Green Beret, and he gives a TED talk and he tells the crowd, we don't ever get life doesn't ever get easier. We just get better at dealing with the hard shit. You just get better at living every day with it. But you can't do that unless you start doing it, If you just try to run from it, the best way to get through a prairie fire is running through the fire. If you try to run from the fire, it'll catch you and kill you. And when you run through the fire, you might come through with some burns and some scratches and scrapes, but that little bit of pain for a short amount of time is better than running for years and eventually letting it consume you, consume your family, your children, because it'll pass down like an alcoholic or a drug addict or, father wounds, mother wounds. If you don't deal with those problems, they'll pass down to your children and your children's children until somebody ends the cycle. And that's what I did. I had to break the cycle. I had to stop the generational curse that is my last name. My children have the same last name as me, and I am the last one that'll deal with any shame associated with that.
Dude, I'd speak to breaking curses. I'm worried I'll send you a picture of it. I posted it earlier, but that's I told my kids, and they're a little bit older, where I don't share. I haven't really shared with anyone a lot of the violence of just like I tell the story about my grandfather getting arrested on a tractor, but like I didn't. He shot my aunt too, right? Just I hope so. There's some things I haven't told him, and I'm like, you guys are the I planted the root, but you guys are the fresh branches, and we're rewriting the family tree. And you spot on, man. We are. We got both oars in the water rowing in the same direction with just there's no reason for us to continue that freaking madness that we was raised up in and passing that along. Somebody's got to step in and break that crap. When you was tell one thing I was going to ask you to speak to those folks when and I'll tell you about mine in a second, but I'd love to hear from you on this is when you were really starting to find traction on saying, I'm going to do this different, did you have to change people that you were around or influences?
Maybe. I'm not really sure. Since I got married, I kind of just, me and my wife have kind of we've just been together.
Yeah.
The thing I'll say to that is I had to leave family behind, my mom, my dad, my sisters, they're all stuck in this life, and I tried to help them, and I would still try to help them today, but there's only so much you can do for somebody. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it, and so I think so many people will say, well, that's family, like family's family, that blood is blood, you never turn your back on family. And I think that because people know that, they'll use it as a crutch, like you're my son, you're my mom, you're my sister, like you need to help me. And it's like, no, I've tried. And as a matter of fact, I've given you more than you deserve. So I've had to move on from my family, unfortunately. My kids will likely never meet their grandparents on my side. They'll likely never meet my mom, my dad, my sisters, because of the path that they've chosen. If they fix that, then sure. But I don't want my kids. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I don't want my kids meeting my parents because I don't want them to think like that's daddy's mom, that's daddy's dad, like that's my family. And they wouldn't even think that anyways because they're so young and innocent. They don't, it wouldn't matter to them. But it's just leaving family behind is the biggest thing, man. Like that's what I had to do.
No, I'm with you. Like I had to put some walls up with all that as well. And I had to. One of the things that I think frustrated me about growing up in that environment was everybody trying to make it okay, and everybody I was around. So this is the way it is. Um, and I had asked my mom years later and about something. And she goes, well, Jeff, that's just the way it was. And I stopped and I was like, no, 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 no. That's the way it was for us. Everyone else is out here living normal lives. Turns out we're the only ones freaking fighting and raising Cain every night and flipping over couches and doing all this stuff, right? Turns out that the way we were doing it was not okay. And I understand. Like that was a part that really frustrated me. But there's some friends I had to take a big pause from. Some friends paused from me because they knew that I needed to get right with me. And the way we hung out was, we would get together and have drinks or whatever. So that was something I needed to get away from. During your time, and I'm going to wrap, I got one of the things I was going to ask you. I'll tell you what my experience was, and I want to hear yours. Is in 2007, when I was at my worst, I got a DUI, and all of a sudden my career ends, all these other things. And everybody's like, Jeff, you really ought to think about getting some counseling. I struggled because at that time, I had no one that I felt like could relate to me. Like no one is the only people that could relate to me was other people that had walked alongside of me, and that's why I spent a lot of time with those folks. But did you have any success in finding anyone that, like in the military or counselors or anything like that?
No, I didn't, but that was my own doing. And kind of the same thing you're saying was I had this mentality that nobody knows what I'm going through, nobody can relate. And anytime I talk, to this day, I've met maybe 2 or 3 guys who have experienced what I have to a T, and we can actually sit down and have a conversation and be like, holy shit, like, yeah, same here. I've dealt with that, you've dealt with that. But I was just talking to a buddy as I left the gym this morning because he has that same problem. It's like, well, how do I talk to somebody? How do we have these guys, like, nobody's experienced what you have. Nobody's experienced what maybe Jason has, or some of these other combat veterans, or first responders, or even me. They can't relate entirely, but that's not their job. Their job is to be there for you and let you talk in a judgment-free zone and let you process what you're going through. For me specifically, I process a lot through speaking, telling, and storytelling. The more I tell my story, the more I'm able to realize, and even getting on here with you, you've asked me questions that nobody else has asked me. So it allows me to dig into that I'm opening up these other boxes that I've not opened up yet, because you're in here asking me questions I've never heard before. And that's the beauty of therapy. It's not about this person doesn't know me, this person's grew up with everything they have, they can't relate. They don't have to relate. That's not their job. Their job is to listen to you and allow you to process it. So a lot of people, when they go and tell their story, I think one of two things happens. They get pissed off that the therapist doesn't say anything, or they'll tell their story to somebody who's not a professional, and that person responds in a way that is not conducive to them. So if I tell you my story and then you say something, I don't know, why did it take you so long to get over it? And then I blow up on you. Well, that I'm just as much wrong here, because you have to tell your story and talk about your problems, but you have to understand that the other person may not have the answers. They might have them, but they may not. And they may say something, because especially as you're going through a traumatic journey in life, they may tell you something that triggers it, right? Or they don't understand what to say. So they're just trying to fill the space by saying something. And a lot of times that can be the wrong thing. The wrong thing I don't think there's really a wrong thing you can say. People don't know how to respond to incredibly traumatic events, especially if they can't relate.
They're like, most times they're sitting with their mouths open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have a friend who went and saw a regular counselor, and he was like, I felt like I was counseling the counselor afterward because of all this
Right,
stuff.
right.
Dude, I told you I was going to guard against your time, but I can't thank you enough. And I'm telling you, was yesterday it was on my mind. I made my post about this, the grandfather thing, and I kept saying, like, this is the right time to get this out there. One thing I was going to tell you, when I was getting ready to post it, I called my wife. I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to put up this post. Friends of ours is going to see this. Ultimately, it's going to get back to our kids. And I don't want my kids getting picked at of something that I find humorous now. And I'm just trying to, because when I speak, I enjoy the humor side of it. I do a little comedy. And she goes, wait till tonight and talk to them. So when I picked them up from school, I was like, hey, this is what's going on. I want to put this post up. It's like, what do you guys think? This is a 12 and 14-year-old. They're like, Dad, that don't affect us. So that we appreciate you. Like, my daughter's like, I'm glad you told me. She goes, but I said, what are you gonna say if someone comes up to you and says something about it? She's like, you helping people. That ain't affecting us. And I was like, holy crap. And then rolling today with mine and your conversation, I feel like the universe is kind of got us in the right spot, my man. So I appreciate you letting me know that I hit you with a couple things, but I think when you put a couple common folks together that have the things in common that we do, it's easy for us to pull out those moments for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm going to close with this, and I think when you look at it too is you and I have this story that is going to impact and empower thousands of people that are struggling their butts off right now. And I hope that this takes us to a point where me and you get to be in person on stage somewhere and look at all those people's in the eyes. Because I think you got a heck of a story, and I'd love to compliment you on the stage at some point in time. And I'm going to do all the things that I do on social and get this thing out there. In fact, we'll try to get this out by tomorrow because I want to start. We want to create as much buzz to get everybody to get your book on their Christmas list, man. So, what was the name of the book again?
Strength Beyond the Shadows.
Strength Behind the Shadows from my man Seth Gehle. Everyone, make sure you follow this guy. What's that Instagram handle?
My Instagram handle is Go Beyond the Shadows.
Go Beyond the Shadows. So make sure you guys connect with my man Seth and follow along with all the good stuff that he's doing. And I can't wait to see where this story takes you and I, and me and you get back together on here and get down deep in the weeds on a couple. I think there's some things that you and I can do to speak to a couple certain events that would really help pull some conversations out for some folks that's needed. Is that cool?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
All
man. I
right, my
appreciate
man.
you.
All right, sounds good, my brother.